also Zaire's mom. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Zaire in a second. But being that I am from Buffalo and we a little extra about our football team who is playing right now, we're going to check in with Erie County Legislator Howard Johnson to figure out what the score is right now.
My sole purpose is here to keep everybody up. Playing Denver Broncos, the score's 42-9 Buffalo.
Come on. Go Bills.
Sorry, Denver.
See, that's how we roll in Buffalo, right?
Go Commanders.
Greg,
Go Giants.
I love you,
Go Giants.
I will also add, Buffalo is the only football team in New York State.
Come on. Come on.
Ouch.
Preach, preacher.
Ouch. Let's go Bills.
All right, I like to start things off with a light, a little laughter because what we're talking about today is very heavy. My city, Buffalo, New York, was the focus of domestic terrorism on May 14, 2022. And my son, Zaire Goodman, was shot and injured in that massacre. We will start by saying that he is well. Thank you. He is a survivor. So a terrorist stormed into my community, shot my son through his neck, the right side of his neck, and it came out his back, right above his spine. And so for the last 3 months, my family and my city has been in turmoil. And so just a few weeks ago, my dear friend Brittany here, who is on the board of Netroots, thought that it would be an amazing idea for us to be here and to talk to you all about what happened in Buffalo. And I thought, I'm really busy. I don't have time for another thing. But I know how important it is to have this conversation. And so I want to introduce our panel because these people here are change makers. I call them friends and colleagues, but they're change makers in their own rights. And so I'm going to give everybody an opportunity to introduce themselves. And we're going to start at the end with my friend Greg. Greg down there.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Greg Jackson, the Executive Director for Community Justice Action Fund. Come here not just as someone passionate about politics and change, but also as a survivor of gun violence. I was shot in April of 2013, and I was also shot 4 days after the Senate failed to take action on the background check vote. And sitting in the hospital, literally fighting for my life and turning on the TV and watching elected officials make excuses lit a really big fire under me. And so ever since I was able to get back on my feet, I've been committed to bringing about change, but most importantly, reversing some of the political damage of neglecting this crisis of gun violence that we've seen. So excited to be here.
How you doing? My name is Erica Ford. I'm the leader of the rap group.
Oh yeah, we also got bars though. We got bars. We on YouTube.
But, December 12th, 1987, I actually went to a rally in Goshen County because the correction officers were spraying water at the inmates in Goshen Jail, turned the temperature up, and had the KKK outfits on and was terrorizing the inmates. And we went up there, and at the same time, the Tawana Brawley situation happened. And I went to that rally, and something woke up inside of me, and it never went back to sleep. And so I'm here 30-something years later and continuing to struggle for our people's liberation.
Good afternoon. My name is Garnell Whitfield. I also am from Buffalo, New York. I spent 36 years in public safety, Commissioner of Fire for the City of Buffalo, and Assistant Commissioner of Homeland Security for New York State, covering the western part of the state. So I've spent much of my life responding to these kinds of incidences. On May 14th, 22, my life changed. My mother was one of the victims, the eldest victims of the Tops Massacre. I responded over there not looking for my mother, but to help my community and found out my mother was there. I'm here amongst this group of people here. I'm honored to be here. I'm new to this struggle, new to this fight, but not new to the trauma that's been inflicted on our communities for a very, very long time. So I'm honored to be here and look forward to learning with you all.
Hey folks, my name is Brittany Baxter. I'm born and raised Buffalo, New York, Maston District. Well, now Ellicott, because a little bit of redistricting a couple of years ago. I'm not gonna complain about that. And you know. And I've been an organizer, activist since I was 19. Got my start with the Black faction of the Democratic Party in Buffalo. Cut my teeth on organizing in Buffalo and fell in love with it because it was a way that I could see my community identify the issues, talk about the solutions, and actually be inspired to demand change. But over the years, seeing people get really tired of hearing the same old thing, same old excuses, and not seeing any real change in a place that is one of the most segregated places in the country. I jokingly refer to it as 1965 Alabama, because until I became an adult, I didn't realize that white people actually lived in Buffalo. I thought that Elmwood, once you cross Main Street, was the suburbs, and I didn't understand that. And so for me, it was really just being able to live other places and experience working in the South, working in Maryland, working in DC, seeing how communities interact very differently, and coming home and still being like, what is happening here? Mm-hmm. And what can we do how can we continue to build on what was the foundations that were laid so we can actually affect some change? That's why I'm here. I'm excited. And while I don't live in Buffalo anymore, everybody I've ever loved has lived and died in Buffalo. My entire family is back in Buffalo, and my dear friends are here. And so I'm here to support and talk about how we use these events as a catalyst. Not use, but these catalytic events can be used to build power, and we can do 10 years of power building, community organizing after events like this in a matter of a year or two if we have the plan and the strategy, and that's what we really need to talk about. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Hey everybody, my name is Trevon Bosley. I'm from Chicago, Illinois, and I'm a board member from March for Our Lives and a member of the Brave Youth Leaders. My first experience with gun violence was in December 2005. My cousin, Vincent Avant, he was shot and killed in his car down the street from his home. And then April 4th, 2006, my brother Terrell Bosley was shot and killed at church while getting ready for band rehearsal. Following both of their deaths, I knew that it was a pain that I was feeling, even at that young age, that I didn't want anyone else to feel. So I started going out in the community and trying to create change, try to be the difference maker in my community. And I've been doing it ever since with Brave in Chicago and now with March for Our Lives. So that's where I'm from.
Yeah.
All right, so quickly, I just want to talk a little bit about Zaire. I know I mentioned him, but that's the kid. I call him the kid. I've always called him that. And, crazy enough, that picture of him on the right there, I took that 2 years ago, July 8th. That was his first day working at the Tops grocery store where the terrorist attack happened. And yeah, he was really proud. He's a college student, and I truthfully, I was that mom who didn't want him to work, right? Because I started my life early, right? I worked early, I paid bills, helping my mom do all those things, and my son doesn't have those problems, right? And so he's an only child, he's spoiled. And so I really didn't want him to go to work, right? I wanted him, truthfully, to be like the white kids, like stay home, relax, go hang out with your friends, you ain't got no stresses, there's no reason for you to go to work. I don't need help paying bills, right? And so for me, him wanting to, he was determined to get this job. And so he got his job. And so that was his first day of work, that picture. That I took of him. And then here we are 2 years later, my son was shot at that store. And since then, it has been my mission. I work in, like I said, diversity and inclusion spaces. I get paid to talk about gun violence and racism. That's what I do professionally. And now it is my job to talk about those things in the context of being a lion for my son, right? And yeah, and so I spoke in front of Congress in June, where I gave a very honest depiction of Black America and America as a whole, where I spoke truthfully about this country and what my people have been through in this country and what they continue to go through in this country. And that is where we're going to start this discussion, in that in my statement to Congress, I told them that America is inherently violent. And when I say that, it goes deeper than guns, right? It's way deeper than guns. It's about slavery. It's about my ancestors being raped and hung and sold, right? And then it gets deeper than that, because that fast forwards to today, where we talk about root causes, right, which are violent. Root causes, social determinants of health, all those things are why this terrorist attacked my community, because he could. And so I'm going to bring in Erica into this conversation about the inherent violence in America.
Yes. We talked about that yesterday.
Yes, we did.
You know, I was thinking, and that's why I said what I said about December 12th, 1987, because the system of racism and oppression is the foundation of America. You know, and anything else, we trick ourselves to believe that there's a Democratic Party that wants democracy.
Facts.
Because when you look in every community, you talked about Buffalo, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you look in Buffalo, like I drove that line, right? And I'm like, what the hell is 2022? It's 2020, it's 2019, it's 2000. Why are Black folks living like this? And you go to Mississippi, Alabama, Atlanta, Long Beach, any Black part of a community where they call the South of whatever, South Long Beach, South whatever, is decapitated, what's the word? Say it. My people talk about how I make up words.
Dilapidated.
That, because we're not going to decapitate somebody today.
Bars. We got you.
So just beware, I make up words. But that's how we live, right? They got us living like that. That's not an accident. This is America. We gave how many billions of dollars to Ukraine now? They built Osama bin Laden, right? They built these people who they call terrorists, right? They funded their stuff. And so when you talk about the investment in inherent violence, right, that is a cycle of what our children pick up, right? And so they come to Buffalo because there was a climate set in the United States, right? From the top, it was set. And people sat in office like there's rules and regulations that we have to obey, while blood was filtering the streets across America, right? They sat there like good patriots, Democrats. Let me not be honest today, right?
No, talk about, girl. Tell on them Democrats.
And so,
they wanna be the allies.
in order for things to change, things have to change. But you see an 80-something-year-old grandmother get blazed down in this, like, I'm not sure how many people saw that video. But this trauma, vicarious, indirect trauma that our people have been living under is intentional.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And we have to level up who we putting in this office. This is a political event. who and why are we putting these people in office, and what are we going to hold them accountable for? Because business as usual someday has to change, please. How many of our babies and our family, like we say enough is enough every single time? Every time they get up. March for Our Lives said, we don't want your thoughts and prayers. Right?
Come on.
We still praying with their thoughts.
Come on. Yes, Erica. Thank you, Erica.
Erica
And-
talked about how they manufactured, how they built Osama bin Laden and the other terrorists. They also built Peyton Gendron,
Yes.
same guy that walked into the market. They built him.
Yes.
He was not by accident.
Yes. Talk about
Garnell,
what
I
you
want
talked
you
about
to,
yesterday.
carry on that.
Yeah.
And how we, Garnell has been on the front lines of this since the beginning, just like myself, right? And a part of this conversation is, now what, right? Now what? And so that's where I want you to take this conversation.
Well, I went to the March for Our Lives. I'm very, very, very happy and honored to be a part of this struggle, like I said. The gun violence, to talk about getting some more gun safety legislation passed. We certainly do need it. Mental health piece, it's a big deal. We need it. Up until now, they've been cutting all of these budgets for mental health and everything else. But the truth of the matter is that what they're not talking about is white supremacy, white nationalism, racism, and the bigotry that this country was founded upon. And until we have that conversation, until we start dealing with that, that's the root cause of all of this. And until we have that conversation and we get honest about our history, and not just our history, but your history too, their history, because that's really what they're denying. I know what my history is, but it's their history that they want to cover up. It's the things that they've done to us. And when you talk about race replacement theory and all these other things like that, they're not afraid of us taking their places. They're afraid of having to take our place and be treated like they've treated us. That's the truth of the matter.
Yep.
Okay? That's the real truth of the matter. But that's not our goal. We're looking for equity. We're not looking to treat them as we've been treated, but that's their real fear. When you start talking about this fear, we hear a lot about fear. That's the fear. The fear is they're going to have to live like we did or like we do. That's what's really going on here.
Thank
So,
you.
can I say?
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to say something because Erica touched on something really important, right? And Garnell as well. The reality is when we think of what happened on May 14th was the culmination of decades and decades of ignoring the reality of the quiet racism, the way that we operate, right? Like how do all of the black people happen to live on the east side of Buffalo and not East Buffalo, right? But now that it's attractive, now that the land is valuable, there's been value placed on it now. Now we want to call it East Buffalo. We have all of these ideas, but we still talking about the only grocery store that has existed in that community, and it only exists in that community because, not in that community, that grocery store is two blocks from my mama's house, from where I've lived in 1993. In my community, where my family lives, right? We talking about 2003, this thing was built, and it was built because of black electeds like Beverly Gray, who fought tirelessly to get one grocery store.
10 years. It took her 10
We are
years to
still
get that
waiting
store.
for another store. It is still the only grocery store in the 14209 zip code.
Right.
And all of this, it was real lovely. I think it was great that folks wanted to come and they had refrigerated trucks, but the conversation should have been how do we get 2 more grocery stores here?
Right.
So that folks choose to not have to go there. And in the meantime, how do we make sure that the seniors who live in that community get the food, the nutrients they need without having to walk? Because we also forget that Buffalo is real, real cold and snowy, a significant part of the year. So everybody don't want to get on the bus. So, but it's literally, it's all these policies, it's all of these things, like even when you have black electeds, right? They're still in a system that was set up for destruction for us anyway, and it's only so much that they can do.
Right.
So we have to what I know that we have to have an understanding of how we pass down that history, so we can call a spade, and then figure out how we navigate this system that's ever changing. Because again, it's a chessboard, and they change the rules every time we figure out how to build a little power, and they tear it down, or they corrupt the people that are representing our interests, or who claim that they're representing our interests, right?
Yes.
I actually do candidate training, and I've trained a few thousand candidates across the country. And one thing I tell people is, like, you can't let up off their necks once you get them in. That's when you need to be breathing down their necks, because they're going to go into a system, especially if they go into a legislative body, and they're going to be told to sit down and wait their turn and learn something, don't have no opinions. And we're talking about people that once we get them in, we just like, okay, you got this. You know what we want. Just go do it. But we don't understand how these systems work, or how to even navigate them long enough to build and execute that liberation strategy that we so desperately deserve and that we're entitled to just by nature of being human beings. But really, that's like, yes, but like, thank you for touching on that.
But
because
we
the
also,
history is-
let's give a round of applause. We also just got $3 million to the brother so that he can build the first black-owned supermarket in
Yes,
Buffalo.
Alex.
So
That's
Yeah.
true. Yes, shout out to Alex Wright. Absolutely. So, you know, while we're talking about root causes, I know that Trayvon, that's kind of one of his areas of expertise. So I want you to have an opportunity to, you know, talk on that.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, being from Chicago, you know, people hear a lot of different things on the news and the media, and they always just make this assumption, oh, it's gang-related, this should have happened. Oh, it's gang-related, they were doing this wrong, they were doing that wrong. Majority of the time, people being killed in Chicago are doing nothing wrong. Like my brother, he was at church, just living his life as normal. Most of the time, the media ignores the actual causes of gun violence in our community. They always want to just look at what's happening, who died. They just want to look at the leaves of the tree of racism and problems in Chicago, but they never address the roots of this problem, which is our education system in Chicago, black and brown communities. Honestly, we don't get any funding in any of the schools. I know my social studies class, mind you, President Obama was on his second term. My social studies book only went to George Bush, the first term. So understanding that that's just one root cause. You want us to go out into the world and try to get a job and try to be successful, try to go to college, when 30 days out the year, one of our teachers is a substitute, or we don't get the same funding that they would up north. So then we have the incarceration system of everything going on in Chicago. We have everyone going to jail for little to nothing, just being harassed by the police. Just like me, I've been harassed by the police countless times in Chicago. And then just understanding that there's so many different systemic issues going on at the same time, and ignoring those and only saying, oh, they just like to kill each other. No, you're putting us in a position where we cannot succeed, and the only thing that's happening is the results of this. Like, literally in Chicago, like, it's so segregated, like everyone said before. Chicago is no different. It's literally a community, a white community, that is 9 miles away from a black community, and the age, life expectancy is a 30-year difference. People in the white community live up to 90, people in the black community live up to 60. That is only 9 miles away, and you can understand the differences in each one of those communities just based off that. So just understanding that the root causes of gun violence really stem from racism. It stems from redlining. It stems from all these other problems that were created, and now people just ignore it and blame us for the issue that they created.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So on that, I want to bring in Greg, you know, because when we're talking about root causes and we're talking about, you know, the issues in the black communities, you know, a lot of times, because I know in the work that I do, you know, I see those root causes, right? And I take that information back to my boss, Senator Kennedy, and I'm like, all right, what legislation can we put together to fix this root cause, right? And so I know my friend Greg down here is a, you know, a master legislator, and he's not a legislator, you know? Like, I love that.
Not yet.
So,
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional. I was kind of soaking up the inherently violent piece. So folks may not know this, I grew up right near Charlottesville, Virginia. I went to elementary school there, I went to college there. And I'll never forget when that attack happened, we only lost one life, but there were hundreds of cameras there and no one there to address the problem. And when I went to Buffalo, it was the same thing. I got there on Monday after the shooting, hundreds of cameras there, capturing the moment. Tell your story again. How does it feel to be black in America? What happened to your cousin? But then there was 2 or 3 organizations, March for Our Lives being one of them there. But there were hundreds, if not thousands, of folks in pain and in need. And it just kind of tears me up because I feel like in America, violence is entertainment. You know what I mean? And it's not like, even when it's real, not when it's a movie, even when it's real, when people's real families are dying, when people's real neighbors are harmed, when people's real communities are destroyed, it's still entertainment and not necessarily a problem we have to fix. And it's something that really kind of boils me up on the inside. And, you know, because I feel it. I've experienced it, but I've grown so close with so many other people who have experienced it. And to me, it's a really big problem. And there's nothing entertaining about what's happening to our folks. To tie it back into root causes, Mr. Bosley here is right. There's so much to the problem that's being overlooked. And a big thing that we've seen at Community Justice is that folks will say, oh, we want to address the root causes. Oh, we care about ending violence. That's why we hired more police. Oh, we care about ending violence. It's not Chicago's fault. It's Ohio's fault. Oh, we care about ending gun violence. It's not New York. It's those people in North Carolina shutting the guns up here. And everyone's quick to scapegoat. So what we did is we did a report. Just came out this week. It's called the Violence Prevention Index Report. And we looked at the top 50 cities and assessed what programs are they doing, what efforts are they putting money in to address the risk factors and root causes. And we found that 92% of the cities most impacted by violence had a score below 60, which is what? We went to school, right? Amy, what was that? What would that be in your class? Yeah, not great. And that's the thing we have to do. Like, we can't always get caught up in the theory, and I know racism has been systematically oppressive, but we also have to be very concrete and specific. Are you investing in this or not? Is your Department of Health doing something about the health conditions in this community or not? Is your employment services, are they focused on people who are hurt the most or not? You know, are you providing victim services for families that have been impacted by violence when the cameras are not there or not? And we have to start holding our city governments accountable because almost all of them are failing at addressing the risk factors and root causes. And they'll jump and shake and dance and shuck and jive for the cameras, but we have to hold them accountable when the cameras are not there. And I always push back when we talk to politicians and even other activists. When we talk about gun violence, it is a very big, overwhelming challenge. You know, hate is a big, overwhelming challenge, but that doesn't mean there aren't concrete things that we can do that save lives. Right. What Erica Ford and Life Camp Inc. does every day saves lives. But guess what? There's only one Life Camp Inc. Why isn't there one in Buffalo? Why isn't there one in Chicago? Why isn't there one in Detroit? Why isn't there one here in Pittsburgh? Right? And we have to start asking those tough questions of like, what are we investing in to address these real issues? And are we really pushing to expand solutions that work if we actually agree that violence is a problem that we want to solve?
Absolutely. And I'm sorry, we're going to keep going with this America is inherently violent because that's just what it is, right? And that is one of the issues that the reason why Black people find themselves in the situation that they find themselves, right, is because of the violence. But I want to take it one step further in talking about domestic terrorism, right, and talking about white supremacy, right, because for me, I have to keep bringing this back to what happened in Buffalo, to those 10 Black people who died, right, and my Black son who has a hole in his neck, right?
And I want to freeze you right there for a second. Because, yes, 10 people died. But how many more people died
Before that.
that day? Because of the vicarious, some people are not moving forward, right? Because of the trauma that happened in that day in the store. Like I heard this young lady who was working in the store, and she was telling her story about how she had to crawl under another person who was dead to make it look like she was dead so that she didn't get shot, right? And she wakes up with that every night, right? And that's not living, right? And so, you know, the impact can't just land no disrespect or anything to the 10 lives lost, right?
Absolutely.
But we have to make America understand that death is not the only devastation that's happening to our community. Because those are the people who, when you look down the line, like the work that I started because I saw that in these young kids' face when their parents got killed. It gave birth to a killer, right? Because of the anger. They used to call me the angry peacemaker, right? Because I was cussing everybody out on sight, fighting with the police on sight, right? And so that, like, this nation of violence only breeds more violence, right? And then the victims get penalized for lashing out at the violence that is pressed upon us, right? It is not normal for us to live in the conditions that we live in. It is not normal. But yet, black people, they're just savages over there fighting and shooting and killing each other. Yeah. Right? No. America has intentionally not built, communities like this and put us in it, redlining, all kind of discriminatory, racist acts. And then they hold these conferences to discuss politics, but at the bottom of the politics is keeping people down.
Right where they are, yeah.
This redistricting ain't because somebody wanna, it's about keeping you out of the goddamn race. Not allowing power to get into black people's hands. That little kid, that little animal, they said it was a school project. They didn't have a problem with it because it was talking about killing black folks. This ain't an accident. This is intentional. These police come into our community like we're animals. Or like the panel before said, who the fathers of those young men who were killed in the street, worse than animals because they wouldn't do that to an animal.
Wouldn't do it, no.
So this violence, and look, as I'm talking right now, we after COVID, I see my I'm like, I see it, because the light is right there, hard, 6 feet, y'all. But we have to organize control. All politics is local, right, Brittany? So we gotta organize. They stole that race from India and Buffalo. They stole that race. Violence. That is a violent act. Don't get me started.
Bars.
No, because it's so like,
Absolutely. This country is violent, and that's just something that we can't deny, right? We can't.
Oscar
not
Grant's
act like
uncle.
it.
Oscar Grant's uncle,
Uncle
right
Bobby.
there.
Uncle
Shout out to
Bobby.
Uncle Bobby.
Welcome to the space.
Thanks for making it, man.
But, on that token of, I've been telling people in interviews that I've done that domestic terrorism has been here since my ancestors got here.
That's right.
Right?
That's how they got here.
That's just a fact, right? That's not, we've been dealing with domestic, they just put a label on it, a couple years ago, but they still won't make it a federal crime, right? I digress. But domestic terrorism has always been here, right? It is what built this country, right? Literally what built this country. And so for me and, Buffalo, right? I'm going to keep, obviously keep bringing it back to Buffalo and the issues in Buffalo. But we have to figure out a way to move forward, right? And for me, all of this has been hard because I couldn't do anything about it, right? Like in the moment when it happened, it's like my son has been shot. I mean, it was tragic, right? I can't go to work. I can't even think about my job, right? I can't think about other people, gun violence issues. My son got a hole in his neck. You know, like, I can't, conduct a racial healing circle like I normally do because I don't want to hear white people talking about their problems and how they don't want to hear about privilege, right? When my son got a hole in his neck. And so throughout, all of this, I feel like so much good has come from it. So much good. I mean, it's tragic, right? We are at Buffalo, we've been crying for months. Like, we a mess over there. But good things are coming from this, right? And I want to bring in Greg again real quick to talk a little bit about what has happened since May 14th.
Yeah, I will say, when May 14th happened, unfortunately, a few of us here have seen a lot of these moments, right? And a lot of us in this room have seen it from afar. But Buffalo was different because when we got to the community instantly got to work. And I don't know if it was a way of coping, but as soon as we got there, churches were giving out food. Churches were organizing. There was a bike crew did a ride. There were groups that were doing marches, rally, therapeutic services. Folks who didn't even really know what therapy was like, I want to help somebody. I'll talk to you, please. Like,
Yes.
Everyone was in the streets, working to help each other. And, of course, the national groups, and no offense to Netroots, but I didn't see a lot of Netroots groups there, but I saw local Buffalo all together and working their asses off. And it was so inspiring to be a part of that and to be helpful and to watch the community organizations band together and figure out how do we heal, how do we recover, and then ultimately how do we protect ourselves. And that was the thing I kept hearing over and over again is, we felt vulnerable. We felt like sitting ducks, because we couldn't depend on law enforcement. We couldn't depend on our elected leaders. We couldn't depend on government. We couldn't even depend on our education system. The week after the shooting, they had no security officers in the public schools.
Right.
So the kids are terrified. Classes weren't canceled. They had fights in the schools because all that trauma was unfolding. And on top of that, black and white kids. And then when I got there on Monday, there were still threats of additional shootings. I think people didn't even know that. But there was the one shooting that happened, and there was additional threats still on the internet of different locations and different targets. So the entire community was terrorized, but they banded together. And what was also amazing out of that was we had one breakfast meeting where we said, look, y'all, we've seen mass shootings before. This is what's going to happen. The national media is going to be here for maybe a few days. The state media will be here maybe for a few weeks, and your local media will be here for a few months. So in this moment, you've got to figure out what you need and demand your action. And I know a lot of folks are in pain, but the window's small. And they did that. And now we're seeing some tremendous change. Right now, Buffalo is having monthly, I believe, or quarterly meetings with the White House right now. Multiple government agencies have moved around and prioritized different federal grants and resources and are now working with the local community groups to figure out how can they resource more, not to the mayor's office, to the organizations in East Buffalo directly to help them rebuild. We were able to find, she already spoke to this, but $3 million to help build a black-owned grocery store there so the community's not dependent on TOPS. We also are working on building out a wellness center there. The New York State Mental Health, Department of Mental Health just launched a new initiative to provide and triple down on therapeutic services for the community as a whole. And that was not something the governor did out of the goodness of her heart. That was because the Buffalo folks organized and put pressure on them. And then when it came to Congress, Zanetta, that's how I met Zanetta, actually. We both testified before Congress. First of all, I was like, who is this big, beautiful woman with the hair? I was like, I was about to leave. I was like, no way I can compete with that. And then I heard her speech, and I was like, oh, man, she went viral before I even got to the seat. But she crushed it and put the pressure on Congress to make sure they took action. And so we've seen the community of Buffalo, and Mr. Winfield here introduced the President of the United States before his announcement of the first gun violence prevention bill to be passed in 30 years. 30 years. And Garnell was the one who introduced him for that. And so to watch the community of Buffalo go from such a tragic moment that happened in May, right? Or, time's crazy. May 14th, to go from there to putting pressure on the White House, pressure on Congress, solidifying policy and progress, holding government agencies accountable, holding the White House accountable, holding the mayor accountable, well, the governor accountable, and I think next is the mayor. I really think one of y'all should be the mayor, in my opinion. But, or India, yes, exactly. But to watch all that happen was amazing. And our team, we actually have a team that's in Uvalde as well. And a lot of what Uvalde is doing is really echoing and honestly looking up to what Buffalo is doing. And I think that is an example of what communities shouldn't have to do, but have done and should do in the future, God forbidding, to make sure that the political power is built out of these tragic moments and we triumph, despite the face of hate. And knowing that one, I don't even like to say his name. I don't even remember his name. I refuse to say it.
Right.
The legacy he wanted to leave is not the legacy he thought.
Right.
The legacy he's leaving is build a stronger, greater Buffalo, and that's because of you all. So clap to them.
Thank you, Greg. So before we close out, I really want each of our panelists to just talk a little bit about, I know I already said moving forward, but kind of like, what are some things that we can do as not just a Buffalo community, right? Because there are east sides of Buffalo across the country, right? There are communities just like Buffalo everywhere, segregated, lacking resources, all those things. So what are some things that people can do in their own communities, right? And I want to hear from each of you about that. We'll start with Trayvon, yeah.
Just to, piggyback off what everyone was saying, and it's beautiful what the community here in Buffalo did. Every community just has to pick up that same effort. Even if gun violence hasn't affected you, it hasn't been at your front door, you need to be doing the work as if it has. Because gun violence is a snowball effect. It's always coming down that hill, and eventually that snowball becomes an avalanche. So you have to understand that your community can change in an instant, just like any other community in America. So that's one thing to get involved. One thing also is don't be complacent. Don't just accept a few things here and there and think, oh, it's done. All right, I did my job, I dust my hands, and I leave. Understand that the work continues. Lives are being taken every single day. And just because we get one black face here and there doesn't mean that it's over with. We need to understand we need to keep putting the pressure on them, and we need to keep putting the pressure on the other people in power to make sure that we get the things that we truly need until violence is something that we just ignore.
Thank you, Trayvon. Yes. Britt?
Let me start out by saying that I believe that any organizing that we do, we have to have two strategies. We have to have the strategy where we slow the poison of this system so we can live long enough to fight another day. And then we have our liberation strategy, which is like, this is what we want the world that our kids are going to live in to look like. And I think, when I think of Buffalo, I think of one of the things with the work that I did organizing in Buffalo is what I missed out on was outside of the individual access that I had to folks who understood the legacy of the work, the political context, right, the history of the work that Black people were doing in Buffalo, that was never really documented anywhere. And so there was no, if you want to come, if you want to find a place to participate in the work, how do you go and actually learn about the folks who came before you? Right. And then we have to really like develop and retain these leadership pipelines, right? So even as we fight to dismantle these systems, we still need folks on the inside to navigate so we understand what we're up against, right? Yeah. I think that in the Black Caucus, we had a really good conversation about the societal context for how leadership pipelines in Black and brown communities were disrupted in the 70s, 80s, and 90s through crack, through redlining, through welfare reform, right? Like all of these things that disrupted the war on drugs, right? That just completely disrupted these older generations with the wealth of knowledge who survived the 50s and the 60s, who understood organizing. There was a disruption and a break, and we have to restore that, and we have to create ways where we are intentionally using our narrative so that we know how to own our history and talk about what is done and what has come before us, and we've learned the lessons, so we can do that. And I think like that's where we build the power, slow, steady, and stable, so we can sustain it and have folks who understand the bigger playing field that we fighting on, because it's going to always be changing, but the enemy's still going to be the same. It's always going to be white supremacy. It's always going to be capitalism, and we have to teach folks to know that white supremacy don't always look like a white person with a bag of money, okay? Like, we got to understand that sometimes we got to also do the work to deal with that trauma so we can move past the trauma to see what's happening, these decisions that are happening that are impacting our lives, address the trauma so we can deal with it, so we can fight. Because the trauma, a lot of times I see, we get caught up in the trauma in the work, and it took me a few years to actually learn, like, actually organizing and doing the work in these spaces is not healing your trauma. A lot of times it can double down on that. So you need to be making sure you carving out the space so you can heal yourself, so you're not bringing that to your work and hurting other people.
Yeah.
Those are the three things I think we gotta,
Thank you,
we not going to,
Yes.
sorry, I spoke about that.
All right, Garnell?
Yeah, I have nothing like that.
I learned it from you. What you talking about?
Listen, I feel like I'm new to this, okay? I'm not new to the violence or any of that, and in full disclosure, my son has been shot. He survived, but he's been shot, and I've lost multiple family members. I've sat with the mayors and people in power, the governor, and all of these people across my career. And one of the things that I'm learning from this is to speak truth to power. Yes. Not when it's convenient, not when it's just okay, but not when it feels good, but when it's uncomfortable. To talk about these things and to hold people accountable. We have this opportunity, and I'm blessed to have had the opportunities I've had in my life. But right now, what I'm trying to do is to use those relationships, to use whatever influence I have, to speak truth to power and to help effectuate some change within our community. This is a long-standing issue, and one of the things we decided with my mother's passing was to not go into a shell, but to speak up and to call it what it is, and to make sure that her legacy is one of change, one of involvement, and trying to lift others up in our community. And so I'm honored to be here in this panel with these brothers and sisters, my new family here. Yes. And so I'm gonna be paying attention and following in their footsteps for the rest of my life. Thank you.
Come on. Thank you. Erica?
Definitely new family. So I think everybody should go get nails like Brittany. That's what I think we should all go.
First of all, right? Hating on the nail.
But on everybody's badge inside here, it says, "Special thanks to One Hood." Everybody's badge says, "Special thanks to One Hood." So let's give a special thanks to Jashari X, the founder
Come on,
of
One Hood.
So he talked about life camp in Pittsburgh. That's it right there, One Hood. It's a journey. It's a process. There's layers to this shit, and that's what Brittany was talking about. And one of the things that we did in New York City is we got the city to adopt a model that we took there, and it's integrated into everybody's work. And so it has the therapeutic services, it has the violence interruption, it has the job program, it has the advocacy work, it has the hospital work, so we can go to the hospital at the moment a situation happens and be there not only to deal with that family in pain, but to listen for retaliation and be able to mediate and interrupt conflict from going further. It provides free legal services to young people the second they get interacted with police, because we know when they get into the hands of police, they just start talking and incriminate themselves and everybody else, and they didn't do nothing, right? And so what we have to do is get our elected officials to invest in the work that works, right? We have to get them to invest. We have to not feel like they are the power. We are the power. And we have to remind, both in action and in theory, that they work for us, right? And so whether that means going back to general strikes, right? Because it can't exist without us making it exist, right? Or young people who learned how to do fabulous things on the internet and disrupting the process. But we have to be disruptors, right? We have to do, I saw a shirt out there that said, trouble, good trouble, right? Because we can't allow the system to continue to oppress us in the way that it's oppressing us, and just we keep moving on, right? And they do a couple of things like Greg talked about for a minute with the cameras, and then it fades away, right? And then what happened to the person who killed Oscar Grant? They still walking around, and all of those other people, right? And we're just going on like it's okay. We don't ever stop. And I think sometimes it's good for us to sit down and even check ourselves. And the whole question of the trauma, like that's why I had to get help, right? Because me being the angry peacemaker, although some people might say I'm still the angry peacemaker, but it does. It depletes the people around you, right? And so we have to get help. We like, oh, I don't need that shit. No, nigga, you need help. Because you're driving me crazy. But, you know, it is important for us to constantly not be at a level where we can't get checked, right? We have to check each other. We got to check and check in with each other and hold people accountable. I was, you know, we just got to hold other people accountable, even in these conferences that people do. When we're talking about democracy, and black people are always destroyed by democracy and every other cockracy that exists. So, like, we need to have them address our issues in a real sense of a way, like main stage conversations. And, you know, I hope they gave One Hood $1 million at least for this placement on the badge. And if not, we need to make sure they can't come to a city, these type of events, and not support the organizations in a real way. We have a power to do some real stuff, and we just need to come together and hold people accountable to doing that.
Thank you.
And what's the score? Wait, score check? Are we,
Oh,
like,
Come on.
42?
come on, Buffalo. Let's go. That's what I'm talking about.
Buffalo
Greg.
defense.
Sorry, that's the Buffalo Bills score. You know, these folks in Buffalo.
As far as what we can do moving forward, so
Break the cycle of violence.
we'll get there. With domestic terrorism, you know, I really think we have to push our legislators to really build out a real plan to engage these young men and women that are spewing this hate, not just on Fox News, but who are writing in their little manuscripts or saying it in class, because we see firsthand how bad it can get. You know, Jason Kessler, who organized the Charlottesville riots and rallies and protests, y'all know his name? Yeah, we went to middle school. He signed my yearbook. We went to art class together, right? Yeah, he didn't rally against me. He didn't have a tiki torch in art class, right? But a lot of that behavior, I'm sure, was planted in him, but that was nurtured. You know, that was nurtured through social media. That was nurtured through white supremacy, and then that became what took Heather Heyer's life in Charlottesville. And this person we won't speak of, something nurtured that fire in him to go out and destroy so many people at Tops. And we have to hold them accountable, and it's not just going to prison. It's how are we pushing back against this culture? What are we doing to disrupt and dismantle these communities that are fueling this hate? And holding our government accountable to this, just like they have with any other terrorist attacks in our country. The second thing I'll never forget, I met Quadir, who's from Buffalo. He's got real bars. He's a great rapper.
Shout out to Q.
Yeah,
Quadir
shout out to
Latif.
Q, man. He should be here. But Q said, man, he said we were sitting ducks. We were sitting ducks. And he told me, he was like, how many more buffaloes are out there?
Yep.
And that really haunted me. You know, like how vulnerable communities are all across the country from this type of violence and not being able to even recover in some type of real way. And I think the second big thing we have to do is really put pressure at the city level and the local level for them to build communities that are not just safe from hate-based violence, but all forms of violence. And that the root causes of violence are being addressed, the risk factors are being addressed, and that the violence against each other is not allowed or not nurtured. And then the last thing, and we talked about this yesterday, We've got to get our country to think about gun violence as what it is, a public health crisis, and not just a crime problem. Because as long as we see it as a crime problem, the only answer is crime control, which is what? Harsher sentencing, more incarceration, law enforcement, more police officers, all of which we know has failed. The most incarcerated cities in the country are also suffering from the highest levels of gun violence. And that's because we're trying to treat a health crisis with a crime control approach, just like we did what? The crack epidemic. Y'all remember that one? If y'all don't remember it, we remember it, right? And we saw how it failed. And we have to push back and make sure that the country doesn't try to run the same playbook again when they think about these spikes in gun violence, and that they start to invest real money into public health strategies. Right now, I think in 2017, they invested $7.4 billion into the opioid crisis for health-based strategies. Well, guess what? We're losing more lives to gun violence than opioids. Not that you should take money away from that. The government got plenty of money. We saw all them stimulus checks. So, like, put the money and resources into violence intervention and prevention strategies that we know work, like One Hood, like Life Camp, because we know they work. And if we can get the federal government to start taking this crisis seriously and investing in it, I really think we can reverse all of this. So those are the three things. Hold white supremacy and domestic terrorism accountable and a strategy to destroy it, make our communities better and stronger city by city, and then lastly, shift the lens from this crime control only approach to a public health approach to reduce violence and end violence once and for all.
Can I just, lastly, can I say
Yes.
that for the white folks in the room, we need y'all to hold y'all white mothers accountable in the way that black mothers are held accountable for their children, right? Because no one is talking about the way that that white mama thought it was cool to buy her child a gun, even though he was out here cutting heads off of cats. And that's what we need to talk about, is like what white mothers need to be accountable for the way that they are nurturing and cultivating white supremacy in their kids, and that entitlement that goes with it. Sorry, I just had to say that because we didn't have a conversation about it.
Oh, you good.
You gonna judge me on my kid doing the cartwheel, then you better get Johnny.
All right. So before I go into my next thing, I want to play a video for you all. And I don't know where that video is. Maybe that's it. We about to find out. Is this it? I think so.
I'm sorry I can't be there with you all in
They should.
Can we get that up?
That's what they came out
No?
distributed.
Is your
Yeah,
laptop
he was up
unplugged?
there before.
No, it's plugged in. That is my laptop. Yeah, the video's not showing up though. Oh,
There you go. You had
my friend Matthew over here, I told you I don't do technology, right?
Yeah, put him in the official seat.
Okay, so before I go into my next thing, I want to play this video from my boss. This is New York State Senator Tim Kennedy. Nope, not working, Matthew.
Keep hope alive.
Oh, I see what you mean. Got it.
person for this important conversation, but I want you to know that I am there with you in spirit and in solidarity. Your panel moderator, Zanetta Everhart, is not only a member of my staff as my Director of Diversity and Inclusion, but she's someone that I'm proud to call a dear friend and a change maker in our community, our state, and our nation. As you may know, Zanetta was impacted firsthand by the white supremacist-fueled mass shooting in Buffalo on May 14th. Her son, Zaire Goodman, was shot through the neck by the gunman, one of his first targets that day. Zaire was simply helping an elderly woman with her shopping cart in those life-changing moments. He was and is a helper. And by the grace of God and what Zanetta calls divine protection, Zaire is still with us today. But devastatingly, we can't say the same for the 10 others who were tragically stolen from us that day. Outstanding individuals who gave back to our community in so many different ways. Roberta Drury, Margus Morrison, Andre McNeil, Aaron Salter, Geraldine Talley, Celestine Cheney, Hayward Patterson, Catherine Massey, Pearl Young, and Ruth Whitfield. We will continue to say their names. We will continue to fight for reform in their honor. I'm proud to say that New York was the first state in the nation to enact a comprehensive package of gun reforms in the wake of the shootings in Buffalo and Uvalde. We enacted 10 bills, including measures that raise the age of purchasing a semi-automatic rifle, banning body armor, and strengthening our red flag laws, among many others. It was a historic step. In the days that followed, I was proud to join Zanetta and Congressman Brian Higgins in Washington, D.C., as Zanetta testified before Congress about the need to mirror the reforms that we passed in New York at the federal level. As you know, we've seen progress, but as Zanetta will tell you, it's not enough. Our work is far from done, and so we continue to fight. We will continue to add our voices to the conversations like this one so that we can continue to create the meaningful change and reforms that our communities deserve. Thank you so much for taking part in this important conversation. Zanetta, thank you for your leadership and once again sharing your story. And may we all continue to keep Zaire in prayer as he continues to heal, and we continue to lift up the families who've lost loved ones in these horrific mass shootings. God bless you all. And once again, thank you.
That's my boss. And so I wanted to play that before I spoke about my next thing because the one thing that Senator Kennedy is really good at is sharing his privilege with me. And I say that because it's important for white people to share their privilege, especially when they are employing Black bodies, Black people. And, you know, Senator Kennedy travels a lot, right, for work. He goes all across the country. He's always somewhere, right? Not only, you know, all across New York State, but across the country. And one example of him sharing his privilege is 2 weeks ago, he was in Denver, right? And the whole time he's in Denver, he's saying my name in those rooms. I don't know anybody in Denver. I've never even been to Denver. But the following week, I'm getting phone calls from people in Denver about the work that I'm doing here in Buffalo. You know, and sharing privilege is important. It's important because you just don't know how that can help. An email. Mentioning someone's name in an email could get them a raise at their job, right? Telling people that I went to visit Buffalo after 5/14 and I found a really cool shop over there on Jefferson, you should go there. That's sharing your privilege. And so yes, this message is directly to my white allies. We need you to be more than an ally, right? We need you to share your privilege. We need you to reach out, reach around you, to the Black people around you, send an email, make a phone call on their behalf. Do something for the people that look like me that live in your communities and in your neighborhoods. And so I do have one more thing. So following 5/14, Zaire and I started a book club. And then I'm gonna ask my dear friend Matthew to come back up here because I lost it. Yeah, I don't know what to do with it. Oh, there it is. There we go. Yeah. Matthew is amazing. There you go. Yeah. Awesome. Oh, this keeps popping up. They want me to buy this real bad. All right. So following 5/14, oh, that one up there. Yeah. Maybe? No. There you go. There we go. So my son, one of the things that I talked about continuously after 5/14 is education and the need for education and the need for diversity in education in our school systems across the country. And I know that just like a lot of you, we didn't learn African-American history in school, right? We didn't learn, we learned about Rosa Parks, and Martin Luther King, but that was it. That was pretty much all you got. And so we have to start teaching kids, all kids, white kids, black kids, about African Americans and our place in this country and how this country was formed, right? Because there is no American history without African Americans in the story, right? And so we started a book drive to collect books around diversity and racism and teaching kids, just about black people, period. Right, and so far we have actually gotten over almost 15,000 books we've collected. We have, thank you. So we have an Amazon wish list, which the QR link, hopefully if it works, once again, it worked. Come on, y'all, look at me. I did that on my own. So that is a link to our book list. So we're asking that you please share this link, buy some books. It's really been amazing and fun. And my plan for Zanetta and Zaire's book club is to basically, I want to turn it into a 501c3 one day, right? I want this to be someone's job, to make sure that we're getting books on diversity, books with black kids in them, into the hands of all kids, black and white, right? Because when we think about inclusion, right, and books with black kids in it, for black kids, it's a mirror, right? Like they see themselves and they're like, oh my God, I can do that, and so it's important for black kids to have those books, but it's also important for white kids to have those books, right? Because that's a window, right? It's an opportunity for kids to look at kids, right? Look at other types of kids, other types of families and things like that, right? And if we do that, if we just start with our babies, right? And we start with our kids, because let's just be honest, kids aren't racist. They're taught to be racist, right? Okay, they're taught that. It's not something we're born with. It's not innate. It's not in our DNA or, anything like that. It is actually taught to them. So if we teach them that black kids are kids like them and they do normal things like them, then we can start to see a tide in getting rid of racism. So, yes, so those are my two things. Please share your privilege, share your white privilege, and share your black privilege, right? I share my black privilege all the time. Everything I know and I learned from my boss, Senator Kennedy, I give it right to the black community, right? So we have to share our privilege and buy some books for the babies out there. Yeah. So thank you. And before we go, absolutely, I want to thank Greg, Community Justice Action Fund, Erica, Fund Peace, and I'm going to start March for Our Lives. So these three organizations, they were on the ground following 514, and they have not left us, right? They have not left us. So the three of you and your organizations, Noah, my homie right here, thank you, Noah. Noah texts me. Noah is around for the cause. Thank you, March for Our Lives, Community Justice Action Fund, Fund Peace. Like, y'all are just super, super, super dope. Like, seriously, thank you for not leaving Buffalo. And thank you for staying, and to Garnell,
Thank you
partner.
for those buffalo wings. Delicious.
And Garnell, my partner in all of this, like, my heart breaks, but we gonna do this, Garnell. We got this. We got Buffalo, and they got our back, so we got Buffalo, right? And Britt, you already know what it is.
So
my homie.
when the senator was talking,
Yeah.
I looked to Garnell and I was like, who's the person he was with? Your son.
Yeah.
Because he was helping somebody. And I'm like, did they survive? Because that is alone is tragic. Like, that's
It's trauma. Yeah. My child is in therapy once a week.
Like, I don't think America, and see, in some, sometimes you talked about the books, right? But we also have to somehow show people what happens afterwards.
Right.
Right? Because this trauma that we live under on a day-to-day basis, right? Right, yep. Queen? Right?
Yes.
Right? This is something that people couldn't fathom. You can't even, like your brain won't allow you to visualize it. Because it's you don't know what you don't know. Like, and people need to see what happens to families and
Yep.
individuals. The brother who was on this panel earlier, Kenneth, who was talking about his father who was killed, while he's on the panel, his daughter attempted suicide, right? And so he left, right? But it's because of the killings and the death that happened in her family that made that happen, right? This is real.
Yeah.
It don't stop at that one bullet or that one incident, right? It's vicarious trauma, and we have to make America take responsibility. We have to make them take responsibility.
Absolutely. So I'm just, you can get that
This
one up
brother
there?
has his hand
I can't
up.
get
I
it
think
up there.
he's either,
Yes. What you got, Erie County Legislator Howard Johnson?
no, behind that guy. I was talking
Oh,
about.
I didn't know if there's gonna be a QA session, I think you should open it.
absolutely. I'm down for some questions, please. Sir, right there, back there.
Yeah, I'll start with you, Mike. But before I do that, I just want to say thank you guys for doing this. You know, as an elected official back home, I'm here today to learn something so I can be more proactive, more progressive, you know, in this movement. So, oh, I apologize. That sounds better. No, I wanted to thank you guys for being here today because I'm here to actually learn so I can take something back to my community to, you know, make a difference. And I'll be calling on some of you guys to help me with legislation. And I think that's what we have to do. There should be more elected officials at these events like this because if they were here, half of these conversations would have to happen. Secondly, before I open up the Q&A, is if you guys haven't seen this movie, it's called White Man's Burden. It's a movie with John Travolta and Harry Belafonte. I encourage everybody to watch it. I won't tell you the subplot of the movie, but that movie right there will give you insight to how it is to feel to be on the other side.
White Man's Burden. Good title.
Thanks. I wanted to float an idea on the prevention side. I mean, everything you said today was beautiful, but it's still in the category of response. And I guess the question is, how do we prevent? You know, we've talked in a number of different contexts of looking to the government, legislative responses. The FBI is now saying, yes, white terrorism is a problem, and we need to investigate and monitor. But why can't we monitor? It doesn't take a search warrant to monitor social media. And most of these characters have manifestos out there.
Yeah.
So doesn't it make sense for communities to establish a network and start monitoring social media, Facebook, and use that as a way of identifying potential shooters? And where those shooters have been identified, where they've been picked out on the January 6th videos and so forth, they've lost their jobs, many of them.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that as a matter of self-defense and self-preservation, one of the things we can do, and it goes a bit beyond my technical skills, but this is net roots. It's all about using the internet, the computer, to advance progressive ideas and agendas. And one of those should be establishing some sort of network to monitor social media and all these manifestos as a way of identifying potential shooters and sharing that information.
Right.
And then also making it public. It doesn't take the search warrant, and we don't have to rely on the government to do it.
Thank you.
So I want to respond to that. So I know that there are organizations who are doing that research and who have compiled extensive research on white supremacist organizations. But the problem is, again, a lot of these organizations, most of our organizations are still run by white people who I'm going to assume that the reason those reports have not come out is because they saw a cousin or somebody they know that's associated. And again, this comes back to like white people. I recognize that this country has ingrained rugged individualism and an unrelenting loyalty to your immediate family at the same time, which are two contradictory ideologies anyway, but cool. But it's right. But the reality is, it's like it's the conversations you having at Thanksgiving. it's the conversations you having when you're checking the microaggressions that your family members are putting out there and building up, and because nobody is calling them on it, then they're escalating. And then they think it's cool to pull up in January 6th when they want a nonprofit that actually works with inner city kids, thinking that there's no connection between the work that they're doing and the violence that they were participating in. That really has to be part of it, because that research has been done.
Well,
Is ex-
I actually don't have a question. It's actually an answer. The other thing, I am a digital strategist and live my life online. And one of the other things we are seeing, though, is, every day there's a new social media platform being built. And because people are seeing these manifestos, those folks are leaving the Facebooks, the Twitters, the TikToks, and going to these newer ones that are the alt-right. So, Brittany earlier talked about, white mothers needing to, take some responsibility here. A bunch of the white people who were in here just left, probably go to the final keynote. But this is also where you can be an ally, because I can't get on that app, right? But you can. And you can see things that I can't see, and you can be, raising flags. You can be taking the screenshots and turn them in. That's how we stop it, because they're not saying that in front of me, but they'll say it in front of you because they think they can, so.
But first of all, I want us to be very clear. When we say America is inherently violent, right? That's real,
Yeah.
right? So who you turning them into? Who you turning them into? The counterintelligence program was set up by the federal government to spy and intervene and kill the movement, right? This is their world. Only the people organized can make change, right? We don't need to sit and spy and watch them. We need to organize and educate. Watch yourself, you're on the camera. They got to get my good side, you know what I'm saying? We got to organize, right? And we got to organize our people to, we can maintain what's in who's coming into our hood, right? Because he didn't come that one day,
He should not.
right? So we talk about observation, we need to patrol. I thought that's where he was going, right? Because we have peacekeepers, not those, no disrespect to the ones in Buffalo, but not those. But we have brothers, black men on duty, right? And black women on duty that patrol our community to help protect us, right? To look what's different. Because credible messages means you know this block. So something come in this block that don't look right, you stopping it, right? And that's what we got to do, right? In all of our communities. So when we see our kids, even in the white community, right? When you see this kid doing something foul, something crazy, somebody got to put him in check, right?
Yes,
That's what we got to do.
yes.
Check your heart. Do some heart checks.
I know we're over time, but I just wanted to quickly respond to him too. I mean, Brittany kind of hinted at it. A lot of the white orgs, even mine, is working on. So when you see things like disinformation, you see it being floated around all the time, all these very detailed trainings, all of that. Those analytics, those things that they are reviewing around voting can also be used to monitor and track other information too. I think the problem is that even someone like me, I'm not interested in disinfo, and it is mostly a very white space that is taking off. If I were to show you the level of analytics that they're able to review, they can tell me when and where and what time, and this is what it meant. And even as these new social media platforms are being created, they're able to also access the info on the dark web, right? So I'd say if you are a black person who's here today, you see a disinformation role or training, not the basic ones, but that really detailed one, you need to go, right? The problem is there's not enough of us that can take those skills and now go and create this other, thing that he's talking about, where we'd be also monitoring this stuff in real time too. It shouldn't be you creating a fake social media account to track it. It's not that simple at all. It is like stuff that I don't understand, but I know that we need more of us, in those seats.
Absolutely, thank you. Any other questions?
They never stopped on us.
So I live in Vermont, and so we know Vermont is predominantly white. We are actually a breeding ground for white nationalism. We have legislators being run out of town. I have Confederate flags within 1 square mile of my home, and they're allowed in the schools where my babies go to school.
Oh, no.
My son was forcibly pushed to reenact the Middle Passage. We have disgusting things happening in Vermont. It's a breeding ground, and it goes unchecked.
What?
It goes unnoticed. And so
There's a vacant house on my block. You could come.
I was about to say, please come to New York.
when we say that it's by design, Vermont is white by design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't want us to enjoy the Green Mountains.
Yes.
Bernie Sanders land.
Facts.
Right? And so I really wanted to really talk to you all about the language and white supremacy, the name itself. And I have just been contemplating with other people about using that word supreme and how we internalize that as well, as if we are the opposite and that they are somehow better as well.
Right.
So how do we move that language, or do we move that language? How do we call it out? And you know, just understanding that. We have men walking down the street, Main Street, with AR-15s, white men. You know, like, it's a breeding ground. And by using terms like white supremacy, I can't get the base of white people to follow the things that we're talking about, here, right here. To be able to use their privilege, as we say, to be able to do the things that we have all talked about. I'm not able to move people when I use words and terms like white supremacy.
I think you brought up a good point about like Vermont being white by design, and I think part of the resistance that we get even from white allies, folks in the movement spaces, the reality is like their wonderful white neighborhoods were built on the suffering of our neighborhoods. Like, it is intentional, right? Because they understand power and resources from a place of scarcity, because we don't come from people who have scarcity. We believe in the collective, and the community is good. If the community good and you over there good and mama down the street is good and the neighborhood watch lady is good, that means we're all good. And that's not how they navigate. We come back to that rugged individualism and that understanding of like scarcity and power. We need to hold on to it. And so if we begin to distribute these resources to all of you who ain't had nothing because we made sure you didn't have nothing, now it's like, wait, that means there's less for me.
Yeah.
And the reality is like this is one of the wealthiest nations in the world, y'all. We can figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, we got the money.
Yeah.
But it's like you have to change the mindsets and understanding about how that those resources and power is distributed before these folks even get on board with thinking that the hood needs to be not gentrified but fully resourced.
Yes,
Right.
fully resourced. Check that.
Yes.
We got some beautiful mountains in North Carolina. This all to Virginia.
Nah, I'm claiming everybody.
You
Come
can't.
on.
New York
you
is pretty
can't.
gorgeous too.
You can't run from racism and white nationalism, but you don't have to live in a breeding ground. You know what I mean?
Come
so,
on.
you know, take care of your family. Come on down here. What part of North Carolina you in? Oh, you better come over to Greensboro with everybody else.
Thanks. Thank y'all for the extra time. Really, really appreciate it. I live in New Hampshire, next to Vermont, obviously, and the white nationalists train in the mountains of New Hampshire
this is
and
intense.
Vermont. It's not a joke. The highest amount of white nationalists are in New Hampshire. They self-identify in our state capital. Free staters, they like to call themselves, but white nationalists, none the same. Maybe picking up, Erica, from your amazing point that the day that, in May, that the shooting in Buffalo, there was violence everywhere else in this country. I'm from South Florida, from Fort Lauderdale, a predominantly black area, yes ma'am. And in group chats, family group chats, I saw my parents, my uncles send around screenshots that folks were saying, oh, don't go to the Publix in Oakland Park, there might be a shooting. Don't go to the Publix, in Pompano, because there might be a shooting, right? So how do we maintain our peace in our own communities, in our own mindset, right? My mom goes to the mall, and I'm like, maybe that's not such a good idea, right?
Yeah.
And maybe the last thing, even if we go to white spaces, this terrorist in Buffalo showed us that even if I were to go in there, right, or my mom would go in there, he's looking for her, right? She could be the only black person in that store, but she might be the only one that gets murdered,
Yeah.
right? So how do we try and maintain or keep some semblance of peace?
So with that process, you can't, right? You can't, because you're living in a state of fear, right? And so we can't exist in a state of fear, right? And so we have to be clear on what we're trying to achieve. And one thing that we all know is there's going to become a day that we're all going to leave this earth, right? And so the manner in which it happens is what brings the fear and the anger and so on and so forth. If we, as a community, we have to look at what exists in our community. There's some spaces where there's nothing that's going to happen, right? There's something that broke down in Buffalo and in all of these different places where these people came in, right? Because we opened up our doors and let everybody, come in, right? And so we maybe need to get to nation building, right? Where we are protecting our community, right? From our children who are traumatized and sick and carrying a gun and shooting each other, to anybody else, to police, right? Who think that they can come in our community and treat all of us like criminals, to any white supremacist that comes into our community, right? We have to regain control of our community. Go back to Tulsa, Oklahoma, right? You look at old pictures of black communities with strong, resilient people, right? And so it's a process. It's not happening overnight. I said I started this work December 12th, 1987. Some people in here wasn't even born, right? And so it's a process. The oppression is a process that they calculated and studied they like their temporary microwave people. Let's give them some likes. They like to be famous. They like to look good, right? Let's hype them up on this web, right? And they sucked us all into the web, right? And we think we friends with somebody we don't even know. We friends. We want our validation from somebody we don't even know. Right? And so there's a process that has to reverse and a community that has to rebuild from the mind to the outside.
Yes. All right.
From somebody who's no longer invited to Thanksgiving, by the way.
Tear up the turkey.
But
you invited to the cookout.
The mac is better.
Thank you. I just want to say, it's my first time at Netroots in person, and the most meaningful panels that I've been to have all been led by Black people and Black activists.
Come on.
And like by far, honestly. And that's where learning has happened. And to do that, y'all have showed up and shown so much vulnerability and cracked yourself open to try and help other people change. And that is brave and commendable, and I don't think I am strong enough to do that in any way, shape, or form. And y'all should be really, really proud of what you've done. The fathers that were earlier today, they do this over and over again and tell their stories just to try and help this not happen as often. And I wish there were a lot more people that looked like me that were in these panels. And anytime I can do anything, let me know. I don't have a lot of privilege, but I'll share what I got. So,
thank you.
Tell every town to cut a $10 million check to us.
Come on, every town. All right, so they are kicking us out of this room, but I just want to say thank you all again.
Whose room?
Thank you all. Thank you for coming. Thank you for hearing us. Y'all are dope. And y'all know y'all dope up here. But yes, let's take some pictures up here before we get kicked out this room officially.